How you doing? This is Carlos Cruz with EMC Mortgage. I've got Ryan Gonzalez with Becker Properties. Once again, we're just trying to connect with you and talk with you about what's going on in the market. What's it feel like to buy a home today? I know that one of the things that you and I were just talking about, Ryan, was you had a buyer ask you how much they could afford. And it's easy for us to give a number that makes sense, but let's break it down on what a payment looks like and how that translates to buying a home. The easy answer is, what are you paying in rent? That's why I like to start, right? Because if you're paying $1,500 a month in rent, that $1,500 might translate to, okay, $180,000 in buying power. But what does that mean? Well, for example, yesterday I talked to a lady. We had pre-qualified her. She was ready to go. We had her payment structure set up. Everything was ready. And then she says, oh, wait a minute, I'm going to look in a different area. And so she sent me these two different cities, Nederland and Port Arthur. Well, both cities are primarily in a flood zone. So her $200 estimate for insurance went to $700.
Wow.
Which wiped out her $250,000 buying power and dropped it down to about $200. So I think a great question to ask in this market is, what can I afford? You're going to have people that want to talk to you, and because that's normal, right? They come to you first. How do you walk them through that process of what they can afford? And then when do you feel like it's a good time to hand them off to me so that I can give them an exact number?
I do the same thing as you. I ask them what they're paying in rent, what they're comfortable with paying per month. Can they go up on that amount? And we kind of start there. And then I give them a general ballpark on what that can do for them as far as buying power. But we don't know all the numbers, right? Because insurance is a big deal right now, depending on the county. We talked about that last time. Depending on the county, the city, the state, in city or out of city, it's all relevant, and that goes along with taxes too, right?
Yeah, the county she was looking in, all of a sudden the tax was, we were using an estimate of about 2.1%. I know that doesn't sound like much. Okay, on a $250,000 house, that's $5,000 and change. But the county she was looking at in Port Arthur, the tax rate was 2.56. Well, that little difference makes your payment go up.
Yeah.
And so I think when we all want to know what we can afford to buy, it starts with you and it starts with me. Let's have that conversation, which is kind of what we keep talking about, is just pick up the phone and let's call and see what we can do, what we want to pay, what we'd like to pay, what we're willing to pay. I mean, I know it sounds all the same, but they're all different things, right? I don't want to pay $2,800 for a mortgage, but to live where I want to live and to live in the home that I want to live in, that might be what it costs.
Yeah, people don't think about that, right? They don't think about, okay, what are the taxes in this area? What are the insurance in the area? It's just not something you think about. You think it's going to be black or white, right?
Well,
one number.
It's something you said last week. Zillow, which is where so many people start looking, and there's nothing wrong with that, but it doesn't give you accurate numbers. It's giving you numbers that make it look attractive so that you call them or you apply or you reach out to one of their lenders or one of their realtors so that they can make money.
Yeah. Realtors, Zillow is all about collecting data, right?
Yeah.
Collecting data and selling paid ads to realtors. So their number one goal is to build
Make
that
money.
traffic. Build that traffic and be able to sell it.
And the way to do that is to make something look, unfortunately, deceptive.
Yes. Yeah.
I was telling you earlier, I had a family years ago that wanted a home, and they had some very expensive cars. And at the end of the conversation, I was able to put them in the home that they want. They just couldn't keep both $1,500 car payments. They just had to get rid of one. And they asked me, well, what do you mean? Why is that such a problem? Well, a $1,500 car payment is worth about $160,000 mortgage loan. if you got rid of that, that means your buying power just goes up that much more. I know we don't want to get rid of our nice car, but if it means buying a home and not paying rent anymore, might be worth a consideration.
Yeah, I would ask you how often you see that, because I know there's been a couple situations where buyers would have huge payments on like their trucks. Like, everybody wants a big truck, nice trucks, but those things are not cheap. So like 800, 900 was pretty common for that payment.
In the old days.
But yeah, well, yeah, even more now. But they were trying to stay in the ballpark of maybe a $1,500 payment or $1,600 payment, and the amount of buying power you're losing by keeping that vehicle, I mean, it's tremendous, right? It's a lot.
It hurts. It hurts because the question you ask is, how many times do I see it? I think that segues into credit score, right? So the lower credit you have, the higher your car payment will be. And we don't think about that. Hey, if you just raised your credit score a little bit, your $700 car payment might be $550, or your $1,000 car payment might be $850. And why that makes a difference is, for so many people that are wanting to buy their first home, when we're able to manage the finances and make it a little easier structure, the family's able to buy a little bit more of a home that they might feel either safer in or happier with, or more importantly, doesn't need as much work, or might be that new home.
And there's a couple examples we can give, right? We've been real creative with how you make that debt-to-income ratio work, how you increase that purchasing power. Maybe they don't owe too much on that car, and they can pay it off with some savings, and it makes more sense to pay it off because it increases your buying power by that much more. Or if they still owe a good amount on it, maybe you look at refinancing at that time. Maybe they got a high rate. Now they've been working on their credit. It's better now. Maybe they look at refinancing, like a refinancing option, and that'll open up the doors on purchasing power as well. So just being creative with not just auto loans, but that goes the same with credit cards or any other type of loans as well.
Yeah.
Where we can really look at all those different scenarios, but it's hard to tell you right off the bat without knowing really what's going on. And that's why I don't really get too much into it with them. And
right.
I ask all those questions. I leave it up to you, being the lender, that can really look at all that stuff. And then there's something called a credit analyzer, to where you can see, okay, if you pay this down, pay this off, that could potentially boost up your score. So let's do that first. And you have the tools to really guide them when it comes to all this.
There's a lot of tools that we can use. I often talk about that optoutprescreen.com. It's probably what I tell every family to use. Opt-out prescreen not only gets rid of so much of that junk mail that piles up in your mailbox, but it also gives you a little more control of who's looking at your credit. And so it actually elevates your score a little bit, makes it easier to buy a home. One more little easy thing that you can do. Optoutprescreen.com. It's free. I sound like I'm advertising for them. I don't make any money on it. I just believe in the product. It works.
Little tips and tricks of the trade.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So we talk about maybe maneuvering some of those debts, making them go away. We looked at a buyer the other day that was buying a pretty large $1 million home, and he only wanted to put down X amount of dollars. And I said, do you know that if you put down $6,000 more, I can get you into a conventional loan instead of a jumbo loan?
And what does that do for him?
Saves him about 1% on the rate.
That's awesome.
That's a lot of money. Yeah. And it was just a $6,000 math. You think some of these
1% on $1 million loan?
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah. And so by working with these buyers and explaining to them, hey, if we can do this or do this, we might be able to get a better outcome for you, whether it's a lower payment, whether it's better insurance, whether it's lowering your overall debt. There's so many different things we can do.
And how many lenders do you think are taking the time to really analyze that file and break that down and give them the options? Like,
I think a lot of them do, Ryan, but I don't believe that a lot of them do it with care or with respect. I get a lot of people that are unhappy with whoever they spoke with prior to me saying, hey, he just told me to do this, or he sent me an email and I got to do this.
But they're not really breaking down the reason or the rhyme or reason why they need to do it.
The rhyme or the reason.
Or how much it's going to impact this buyer.
Or their life.
Yes, for sure.
I mean, hey, if we can get rid of this much debt, maybe whether it's paying something off or whether it's trading in your car or whatever the case is, whatever that solution is, if we can work with you and find that solution, we might be able to put you into either a safer home. I keep going back to that, the safer home, the home that you want to live in that's close to the school that you want to be in for your children. I mean, all of those little factors start to add up. And I think if people just, again, picked up the phone, how many people call you and say, hey, well, man, I don't want them to pull my credit.
Everybody.
Right.
I would say 99% of people say that.
And there's this perception that if I apply for a mortgage loan, whether it's at one guy or 30 guys, that my credit score is just going to get ruined. Listen, I've been involved in credit and finance for better the part of 30 years. A mortgage inquiry is not going to ruin your credit. Not paying your bills on time ruins your credit.
Or missing them.
Or missing one payment ruins your credit. Now, Can it be fixed? Can we outrun it? Can we overcome it? Absolutely. Hell, like I said, I mean, we can put people in a home with a 500 credit score.
Yep.
We can put veterans in homes with no credit score, bad scores. We can do whatever it takes. That's not the problem. So pulling credit doesn't hurt, but I do have a solution. We can do what's called a soft pull. A soft pull will take a look at them, and it's not going to be a hard inquiry on their credit report. So for people that are extremely nervous or uncomfortable or distrusting of a credit process or genuinely believe their credit is just bad, we can still help them. We can take a look at that credit with them. We can do it in such a way that it's not going to be another hit as an inquiry. And then we can build a plan and say, hey, look, you do qualify for a home. This would be the amount that you could qualify to buy. This would be your payment. This would be the breakdown of what that payment looks like. This would be your down payment, and this would be your estimated closing costs. We can do all of that.
What's the big difference between a soft pull and a hard inquiry or hard pull from the lender standpoint? Like, can you see everything on the soft pull?
You don't always see everything.
Okay.
That's the catch. But for somebody who's on the fence, for somebody who was told they don't have good credit, for somebody who thinks they don't have good credit, for somebody that isn't sure how much they make and how much they have in savings, can afford to buy a home, it gives them a chance to feel safe because it's a soft hit.
I think it gives them some confidence too, right?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, and we're not gonna penalize them for it. We're not gonna charge them for it. I'm sure there's other people that do, but we're gonna build them that scenario. Now, if they want to move forward and they are ready to move forward, yes, we do have to pull a hard inquiry, and we do have to look at your actual credit report. But it does give us, think of it like window shopping. I get to look at my credit. I get to see what I need. I get to see what I have. I get to see what I can buy without any risk to my credit score because it's a soft hit.
There's a lot of nervous buyers out there, and they always ask, what can I afford? How long is it going to take for me to be able to build up my credit if I have bad credit, to be able to get in a house? And that all depends, right? Every situation is different with every buyer.
It's funny you say that. Gosh, it must have been a year or two ago. Gentleman calls me. His realtor said, hey, I've been telling my buddy to call you for the better part of a year. Finally, he calls me. And he says, I don't know why, but my friend said I can afford to buy a home, but I don't think I can afford to. I have terrible credit.
How many times have you heard that?
Way too many times. He goes, I have terrible credit. I said, tell me why. He said, well, I when I got divorced, my wife ran up all my credit cards, and and I did some stupid things, and I ruined my credit. And I said, when was that? He said 15 years ago.
Oh, wow.
I said, wait a minute. So you haven't done anything with credit in 15 years? He goes, no, I live on cash.
So he's got a 0 credit score now.
He was a blank.
Yeah.
So what we did was we explained to him that credit is measured based on how you behave, how you use it, what you do with it, and what you spend, and how you pay it.
More so recently, right?
Yes, absolutely. And so there's going to be a look back of about 24 to 36 months. And what we're going to look at is, in that scoring, what's going on. Well, if you haven't had any credit in 15 years, you don't have anything to be measured by. So therefore, you have no credit score. He didn't have bad credit. He had no credit.
And this is why there's that saying out there, after 7 years, like, a lot of stuff falls off.
No.
But that's not technically true, right?
It's not. It should.
You come from the
I spent 20 years in collections.
Yeah, you come from the collection world, so you know.
Just because you hear these rumors of, oh, it's supposed to go away, or some of these credit repair companies claim that they can make it go away. If you owe a debt and it's a valid debt, it doesn't go away. It can get resold. And here's the scary part. Invalid debt, meaning debt that you legally don't owe, can also get sold. So imagine there are bill collector companies out there that will buy debt, and then they load it into this data warehouse. And the minute they see things like a car inquiry or a mortgage inquiry, they put that trade line back on the credit report.
Ooh, they know they can possibly get you and collect.
And now they have some leverage to maybe make you pay them. Because guess what? Now your credit score takes a hit. Now here's the good news. If I've already pulled your credit, and your credit was 700, 700, 700 for all 3 bureaus, and that happens to you the next day, I'm not seeing it. I already have a credit report. Now, my credit report lasts for 120 days. So as long as we can get you in a home before that 120 days expires, we're never going to be made aware of that new trade line that got added.
So you don't have to pull it again before you close? Is that?
No, they don't re-pull credit, but there is a credit monitoring service that all lenders use. Because we want to make sure that you didn't go buy a car and forget to tell us and change your entire debt to income ratio.
So it's looking for new inquiries?
It's looking for new debts.
Yeah.
But a collection debt isn't going to adversely hurt your score.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Our score is already locked.
Gotcha.
And that's what we're using to help you price out your loan and define what product you get and what interest rate you get and how much it costs.
Yeah.
So, again, I go back to when it comes to being curious of, can I buy a home? Call me. As a broker, I can pull this soft pull report. It's not going to adversely hurt your score, and you and I can have a conversation about what you can buy. And then if you want to move forward, well, then we have another more formal process. It's not a big deal. It's easy.
And once somebody commits, we can talk about the home buying process and how long that takes, right?
Right.
Usually 30 days, typically. Once we got that pre-approval, we go shopping. A lot of the times, my buyers are finding a house within 1 to 2 months. It just depends on how aggressive they are, how often we go see houses. You'll see 20 houses, and you'll have a really good idea at that time on what you really like in a house. And with the feedback you give me, I can kind of narrow down the houses that I think are even worth looking at or not worth looking at based on area, size, upgrades, 1-story, 2-story, lot size, all that good stuff. So that takes about a month or two, depending on the buyer themselves. And if there's a lot of options in that area, some options are not as much in maybe a certain area than others, depending on the price range, right? I mean, anything under $200,000 is going to be really hard. $300,000, you'll see a little bit more. $400,000, a lot more. $500,000, as you go up, it'll be a lot more options. And so buyers are always curious on that, and always curious on, once you get under contract, How does that work? What can you tell me about the initial process when you first go under contract, how that works from a lender standpoint?
Okay, so there's two types of lenders, and it's that simple. There's a good lender and there's a bad lender. A bad lender, a lazy lender, it's the guy that all they did was pull your credit score, maybe do an interview by phone, or maybe trust whatever you typed in, and you're getting a letter that says go shopping, and you feel great because if you're a first-time home buyer, you don't know what the process is, so you think you did what you're supposed to do.
Sure.
A good lender, a professional lender, that's going to be somebody that not only pulls your credit report, factors in your liabilities from your debts, looks at your income, measures your income to make sure that it's been consistent and that it's a likelihood to continue, whether you've been self-employed or not, and then has found the products and the investors that will work with that specific scenario. Therefore, when you're out shopping and you're in the loan process, you're not feeling afraid or at risk of losing your earnest money, your option money, and wasting money on an inspection or wasting money on an appraisal only to find out 2 or 3 weeks later that, oh, the loan is denied because that bad lender didn't do the job well.
Definitely a lot of fears and concerns regarding that, right? Am I going to waste my time? Am I going to waste money?
That's why we do the legwork up front.
I've had buyers ask me, hey, I know we're fully approved, like towards the end of the process, but should I start making arrangements? I was like, yes, definitely. You definitely should start making arrangements. And they're like, well, what if it falls through? Can it fall through at this point? And so leading up, if you're not continuously in conversation with that lender on the process and educated on how it goes, there's a lot of fear looming in their mind, like, hey,
Absolutely.
This could fall through. What if it falls through? Or like, what's going to happen if this happens? Or like, how likelihood do we have a chance to close? And if you do all your homework up front, you ask all the right questions, you know all the information, then there's no reason why we shouldn't close on the house.
There's always going to be something bad that happens in life. That's just nature, right? The question is your lender a professional and knows how to overcome that hurdle? I had a buyer. We were probably a week away from closing. We were done when the loan was approved. We were just waiting on the close date. The seller didn't want to move it up, and the buyer and his wife got in an accident. He passed away, and now they didn't have the income, his income, and unfortunately, she wasn't able to buy the home. Bad things happen. It's reality. So no professional lender should ever tell you, you're done. It's over. Don't worry. We're good. Because life can happen. That situation, we weren't able to overcome it. We lost 80% of the income.
Sure.
And bad timing to buy a home when you just lost your spouse.
Definitely.
There are things that we do run into, right? I had a guy that lost his job. The company folded up. He had been there for like 20 years, and they just one day closed, and he was 2 weeks away from closing. So I got a hold of the realtor, and I got his permission to explain the situation, his agent, and the agent said, well, do you think he can find another job? If he does, how much more time do you need? Can we still make this deal work? So in speaking with him, he said, look, I'm pretty sure I can get a job in the same field, probably in 30 days or less. And I said, okay, well then we're going to need at least, 15 to 30 days pay stubs, it's just going to be a little bit of work. I said, but if you feel confident, then let's see if we can get an extension. Well, it was a seller that was willing to extend. All they asked for was an extra $1,000 of earnest money. They wanted to feel safer.
Sure.
The guy had the money. He had the savings. I mean, like I said, he'd been on a job forever. And he ended up finding a job within a week, and we ended up closing like 3 weeks later.
That's a pretty extreme
It happens, though.
Scenario right there. It does happen. Yeah. Those things are unavoidable, unfortunately, right? I've heard some crazy stories. I've had some crazy stories happen to me as well with the buyers. I was talking about in general, most times we should be good, and that's always buyers' fears with what if this happens, what if that happens. The job thing comes up a lot, especially I think now more than ever when you hear
There's a lot of fear.
when you hear recession, you hear recession, you hear tariff war, all these things on the news right now. There's a lot of fear just looming in general, and maybe keeping some people on the fence, right? And then we don't know what are really going to happen with rates. I mean, we assume they're going to come down at some point, but we just don't know when. So those are all definitely concerns for sure. But I want to tell people out there that just because you have this fear, it shouldn't stop you necessarily from buying, because I mean, we've seen people buy in all different types of markets, and eventually over time, what happens with real estate?
It always does well.
It appreciates. And it's not a matter if it's going to appreciate, it's a matter of when it's going to appreciate.
And or how much.
And how much, yeah. Because a lot of people, I've had these same concerns with buying, even when the rates were 2-3%, right? Same concerns. But those people that did pull the trigger and felt very confident and educated because they work with me or they work with a particular lender like yourself, they ended up buying, and they're so happy now because a couple of those years, equities were going up about 20% a year.
Which is crazy.
Which is unheard of. It's insane. And so now they're sitting on a really good nest egg to where they can sell, refinance, they can do a cash out, they can do a HELOC.
Yeah.
Tons of stuff they can do with that money because they chose to buy. So regardless of the fear, you should really, if you're really educated on what real estate does, it's one of the safest investments. 90% of millionaires are made from real estate, some type of real estate investment.
It's interesting you talk about that. I was reading an article the other day, and it was something about reasons not to buy a home. And it was one of the arguments was, well, it makes it harder to change jobs. Why? Because if you bought a home and you took care of it, you should be able to rent it. So depending on how long ago you bought it and rented it and what rate you've got, you might be able to either make money or break even. You don't necessarily have to sell it.
People don't even think about that option.
And so they go, well, I don't want to be a landlord. I don't know how to do that. I'm going to be in a different city. Ryan, you manage properties.
Yeah. Yeah, I
for
do.
families that need to rent their homes.
Yeah, this exact scenario has happened a number of times where I hear people fearful of buying because they feel like they're only going to be in the city for a couple of years, whether in the military or they have family in another city and they have a long-term plan. Like, I don't think I should buy right now. But if you really think about it, like, if you're going to go ahead and rent for 2 years, it's the same thing pretty much, because if you can find something comparable in payment, at least you're throwing your money into a potential investment to where you can easily rent it out in this market. Like, our rental market's really good.
Here's an interesting one. At a active duty soldier, young man, 26. He was stationed here in San Antonio. He'd been here for 3 months, and his parents were prior military also. And the first thing his parents...
Hey, this is James with My Insurance Group with a brief interruption to this podcast. It is currently being shot in the My Insurance Group studios. So My Insurance Group is a local insurance brokerage. We are 5-star rated, and we provide policies for homeowners, auto insurance, and commercial business needs. So if you're looking for a great insurance agent, check out the number in the link below. We will definitely get you an insurance quote, or if one of your friends or family members needs a great insurance agent, keep us in mind and keep the My Insurance Group podcast studio in mind when you're trying to shoot video. Thank you.
And said is, do not get an apartment. You need to go buy a home now. All right, he bought his home, and we're closed on it. He's happy. He's probably only going to be here for 2 or 3 years, but guess what? The next duty station he goes to, he'll buy another home. And the next one he goes to, he'll buy another home. And, you know, in the next 10 or 15 years, this man will have 3 homes, maybe 4, because he's not overbuying. He's buying what he can afford. And he knows that he's buying in an area where he'll be able to rent out. His parents coached him. They said, look, talk to your realtor. What's the rent going to look like today? What does that realtor think the rent would look like in 2 years? And then let's find a home that meets that criteria in an area that you can afford. They helped him. Not everybody has that luxury of family that knows how to maneuver that conversation.
I was going to say the same thing.
But again, that's what you do. That's what I do. We keep saying it over and over. Just pick up the phone. Call us. It's not that hard. We can walk through a plan.
That would be ideal, right? If you go into the process knowing, hey, I'm probably going to rent this house out, then you know, and you can let the realtor know, hey, what does the rent look like here? How easy is it to rent the house out in this market? Should I consider a different area because it might be easier to rent? And so those are all good things to know for the realtor when you're buying a house and you plan on renting it out. And that VA buyer, the VA buyers are perfect for this scenario.
Yeah.
Because they're going to get
Their housing allowance.
they're going to get the best rate.
Yes.
When it comes to the mortgage, they're going to get no PMI. And so they're going to have a fairly lower payment than maybe somebody that's using a conventional or FHA loan.
Correct.
And that just means that when they rent that house out, they have potential to make even more money on that house, make a little bit of cash flow. And so, yeah, it's a great scenario for someone like that military, and they don't really think about that, right? And you always go back to the concern about being a property manager, being a landlord. No one wants to do that. No one really wants to do that. They hear about all these bad scenarios. And
Ryan, I don't even do that. I gave you my property to manage.
well, and a lot of it is the preparation up front and finding the tenant. A lot of people don't really realize how to screen somebody properly and what it takes to screen somebody and what it takes to realize whether or not this is probably going to be a good tenant. So
we went through almost 30 days of applicants that we were looking at that you said, hey, look, these are the risks. These are the options. And my wife and I were able to sit down and go, no, let's wait.
You've been through it. Yeah, you've been through it. And that property probably got shown 20 times or maybe more. And we just didn't feel good about the applicants that came through, but it was definitely worth the wait. The ones you have now are
amazing,
spot on. They're good. They're really good. And that's what I tell everybody, like, hey, let's just wait for a better candidate because there are some out there. And a lot of times, like, I think this guy was prior military too. So a lot of times there's that option as well. And maybe they have some secure income coming in too. It just makes the landlord feel a lot more at ease right there.
Didn't you tell me that they were even thinking about maybe buying down the road?
That too.
And so now that family that's renting has an opportunity because they're working with you and with me to maybe buy another home down the road or whatever their needs are, we can help them.
Yep.
It's good line of business to be able to stay in and be a landlord and be a lender and work with a realtor partner that you trust. All of those little things really make it easier. And knowing that you and I already have that experience of doing these things makes it easier to work with new families that want to start out and want some wealth or want a home and want some safety and don't want to live in an apartment complex with, 500 other families. I mean, everybody's got a different reason for what they're doing. And there's not a criticism. It's just a different opportunity when you're a homeowner.
Going back to home buying, did you know that single women are outpacing single men right now for buying?
No.
Yeah.
Where'd that come from?
I just saw an article recently. I forget where it was from, but it showed single women are buying a whole lot more than single men.
That's impressive.
Yeah, it really is. And I've worked with a ton of single women. Sometimes they feel more comfortable working with a woman, but when I've helped them, they are some of the most concerned buyers you can imagine because they're a single woman, and they have a lot of them have kids, single mothers, and so they have all these types of concerns. And so I have to be a little bit more patient with them and educate them a little bit more. But once I do, they feel a whole lot more confident. And a lot of those women that I've sold homes to, I still keep in touch with them. They're doing great. It really empowers them, makes them feel a whole lot more confident about everything once they make that move. And a couple of them are starting to invest themselves. So
that's got to feel cool.
Yeah, that's really cool. And so they've asked me questions about investing and potentially renting out their homes and stuff like that as well. So it's a constant a constant thing where you just need to constantly ask questions and educate yourself, and then you feel a whole lot more confident about moving forward and buying a house. But I wanted to put that out there because there might be a lot of women watching this podcast and thinking, hey, I can never buy. Just like those buyers that came to you like, I don't think I can buy. But you really don't know unless you try. And people hate getting rejected, right? They hate getting denied, rejected. So I always tell people, it's not if I can, it's when I can.
When I can. It's not a no. It's maybe not today. You know, I had to go get a loan. I couldn't afford to pay cash for my home. So I can't buy today, but could I buy? Yes. How did I learn? Well, I went through the process. And, you know, I bought my first house 24 years ago. And it was so easy. I didn't know it was that easy. I wish I had done it probably 10 years earlier than that. I mean, it's just the opportunity to be a homeowner and deal with those things and go through the process and learn from that, and then have an opportunity to maybe invest or have that luxury to be able to move on and still rent it out. I mean, all those little things, it's what we kind of need to build wealth. I'm going to shift gears for a quick second. Yesterday, actually Sunday, we had a little emergency at the house. So I go to the restroom, cleaned up, and I heard a funny noise out of the toilet, and I jiggled the handle. Well, when I walked off to the TV room, about 30 minutes later, I come into the living room, and there is a flood of water in our living room. The hose had popped off and was spraying everywhere, and it was coming out of the toilet lid. I know it sounds insane. Thank God we had a wet dry vac. Thank God I knew where to shut off the valve. And it made me think about something. Is there a reason that people, or what are the reasons that people might be reluctant to buy a home? If I live in an apartment, I don't worry about it, I'll just call the apartment manager, they'll come fix it and they'll figure it out. Mm-hmm. But if I own a home, I have to know how to do that. I have to know how to turn off the valve. And it dawned on me because about a month ago, my niece was in her apartment in Austin, and something was, the sink was making some noise, it was dripping, and it was driving them nuts. Well, she didn't know how to turn off the valve. She was 18 years old and hadn't learned how to turn off a valve to stop the sink from dripping. And it makes me wonder, what are the reasons that people might be reluctant to buy? You know, that little flood, yeah, I had a shop vac. Yeah, I had towels. Yeah, it took me 3 hours to clean it up. But you know what? I also had an industrial fan to dry out the rug. That's part of the journey of becoming a homeowner. I mean, I've owned these homes for 24 years now. And so I think when people get scared or nervous about buying a home or having that responsibility or feeling like they're trapped, it goes back to a simple conversation of, hey, what do I do? Now I'm in a home. Do you walk people through, once they've bought, let's say it's a first-time buyer, and explain to them what it means to shut off your water or your electricity, or what happens when you go away on a vacation?
This is why I love for buyers to go to the inspection.
Okay.
Because during the inspection, the inspector will kind of show you what you need to do in certain situations or where everything's at. Because he's gonna check the valves, he's gonna check the water flow, he's gonna make sure the drains are working properly. He's gonna check or look around the foundation for obvious like cracks and shifting. He's gonna look at the electrical panel, look at the wiring, make sure everything looks good, nothing looks burnt. He's gonna look under the cabinets. He's gonna look on the roof. He's gonna look in the attic, water heater, AC unit. So him doing all this stuff and looking at all these things is...
So going with him and doing and being there, seeing what he's doing.
Yeah, being there, asking questions, being there. And then the inspection report is real thorough, but being there at the inspection and going over it with him is what I like to do with the buyers. And so we can go over every single thing, and sometimes a lot of times actually people don't know how serious something is or how unserious something is. Sometimes it's normal wear and tear, right? Or this is just a common thing we see in certain age of homes. There's certain age of homes where we're going to see a lot of old electrical or old plumbing or just an older AC unit that hasn't been changed out in a while, uses the old Freon. There's all sorts of things that go into knowing enough about your house, and I think it's great when they're at that inspection. They can ask questions and they can kind of see what they need to do in certain situations, because the inspector will most likely tell you, hey, this is not a big deal. I see this in a lot of houses, or yeah, I would definitely ask for this repair to be done or get a credit for this repair. And they kind of give you a little bit of idea of what the magnitude of each situation is or the unit is or whatnot. Like if it comes to like foundation or a roof or whatnot, they usually suggest an expert in that field goes out there, does a quote for you, or gets does basically an inspection on that thing and gets more information for the buyer, so then you have a better idea of what's going on with the house. But this is all geared to basically feel you make sure you feel safe and confident when you're moving forward in this process. It gives you a little bit of peace of mind, and so that's one of the things I always recommend, hands down, an inspection, because it's very important to know how to do these little things. And
You're gonna laugh. My friend bought a new home, and she was busy a lot, and so she missed her appointment to do the walkthrough with the builder as they handed off the home.
oh, that's pretty important,
And
because the builder shows you around the house too.
And so when she got back in town, she called me, and I said, look, I really think you should try and reschedule. I said, but I can give you some tips. And she's like what? I said, do you know how to change your air filters? She said, what? I said, your air conditioner has air filters. They need to be changed. And you want to do it about every 2, 3, 4 months. She said, where? And I'm not trying to make fun of her. Again, it goes back to nobody taught her. Nobody showed her. Nobody spoke to her about it.
Yeah.
I said, if you're going to be on vacation for so many days, or if you're leaving town, maybe it would help to turn off the water at your washer and dryer, at the valve. She says, why? I said, well, if you're gone for a month or a week and your pipe bursts, now you've been flooding for a week. I said, it sounds silly, but just turn it off. Little things, little tips.
Yeah, or turn off the main valve.
Or do that. Well, how do I do that? Well, it's the one where all the bugs and spiders live.
Yeah.
So, there's so many different little things that people can do. And
General
she felt
maintenance
comfortable
tips.
talking with me about it because, again, nobody had spoken to her about it. If we don't know, then we just didn't know.
I also encourage every buyer to call me if they need a contractor, if they feel like something's wrong with the house.
Oh, that's huge.
Because a lot of people just don't know who to call if they have an issue with anything. But, of course, I have contractors for every little thing that you can ever imagine.
Well, look at the contractor you connected me with that ended up doing a few of our properties, and now is the only contractor I use on my property, my personal property. Yeah. So it's just funny how the people that are so much of a benefit that you're able to share with others and know that you can do it with trust, that you can do it and know that these people are going to give good service. They're going to respect your background, your history, your reputation, and they're going to treat those people with the respect to get the job done right.
Yeah. And I've gone through a number of contractors myself. I've used them on personal properties, and I've referred a number of contracts out. There's some that I just won't use anymore, and there's some that I continuously use because I know that they're gonna do a good job and they're gonna be reliable.
Hey, I got a question for you. When somebody says, "Hey, I want a home," how many people do you say, or would you say, that you've spoken to, the first thing they did was call that agent that's listing the house on the sign? Or they called that phone number that Zillow said, call this number, versus calling you? I got to believe, unless you're spending a lot of money on advertising, your reputation is all your word of mouth, right?
Yeah, it is.
And so, how do people know how to make an offer? When they go, I want that house, how do they do it? What do they do?
So I always sit down with all my buyers in the very beginning at the office, and I go over the process in detail. Explain them how to make an offer. Well, first, there's a process, right? First, we're going to get you pre-approved, and we're going to know how much you can buy. So we're not looking at houses that we can't afford or don't want to pay for as well, because right now we just talked about it. Like, rates are an issue, insurance an issue, taxes are an issue. That's all part of your payment. So if one of those things is out of the norm, then maybe in this certain area, your purchasing power is a lot lower than another area. So that all matters. So
you're able to give them a guide of not just how much something looks like, but also where they have different options and what the consequences of those different choices are.
Yeah, I put together a map of San Antonio.
Oh, okay.
And then I put together, there's certain areas that are broken up on the MLS in certain categories, and I'll put like an average price range in that area and days on the market to show how active that area is. But also we know the average price point in that area. So if you're looking in this area, I color code it too. So if you're looking in this area and you want to be in this area for a specific reason, whether it be work or school or whatnot, you're going to have to be comfortable paying like around $400 versus another area where you can probably pay around $300. So it all depends on the needs, right? Depends on the needs, the wants. Are they going to give up that car that they need to give up in order to buy this house that they want? And it really boils down to that, because every situation is different. But how to make an offer is pretty simple. We have to make it in the form of writing, or in the form of a contract in writing, and we have to send a pre-approval letter, which we get from the lender. And once that offer is accepted, they sign that contract, and at that point, it's binding. Now, every offer will state that the buyer needs to put down something called earnest money. Earnest money is typically 1% of the sales price. It's kind of like a security deposit, and it's not something you lose unless maybe a couple days before the closing you back out for some reason. If something crazy happens to you, or you just get cold feet and you have to back out for some reason, then that's typically the only time you lose that earnest money. There's a lot of opt-out issues or opt-out opportunities in the contract for a buyer to opt out and get their earnest money back. A lot of protections for the buyer, a lot of contingencies for the buyer. That way we secure that initial earnest money. In the beginning of the process, we typically ask for...
Quick question, though. Do all realtors use that exact same contract?
Yes.
Okay. So there is consistency across the market of how that process for a contract works. Okay, that's important.
It's specifically for Texas. It's a Texas promulgated contract that TREC provides us. Our Texas Real Estate Commission Board provides us, so we have to use that contract.
Okay.
So we put in that offer in the form of a contract. We put down what we're going to pay in earnest money, which is 1%. We put down the details of our loan, our down payment, what we're going to finance. We put down how much closing costs we're going to ask for. That's all in the same document. And if the seller accepts, they sign it, we move forward. We go into our option period, which is typically 7 days, maybe 10 days, depending on what we negotiate.
And what's that for? I hear that word a lot.
The option period is also called the inspection period. It's where we do our inspections. So immediately after we go under contract and we make an agreement with the seller, we're going into our inspection period. We contact the inspector, and we get that inspection done within a couple days. Once we get that inspection done, he provides a report, and then we go over that report. And at that point, we have leverage to renegotiate the terms of the contract. Sometimes we're asking for repairs to be done. Sometimes we're asking for extra closing costs. Sometimes if it's something massive, we're asking for a reduction of the sales price. Sometimes we're opting out. I'll be honest. We don't opt out too much unless it's something really, really concerning. If there's a huge foundation issue or roof issue, those are probably some times when we'll opt out of the contract. Just really depends on what it is. But without that inspection report, we don't have much leverage to renegotiate at that time. So we use this report as leverage. Now, it may cost you $300 to $400 to do this inspection. Definitely well worth it. Typically we're able to get some type of repairs done, some type of closing costs extra for the buyer, which every dollar counts.
Yes.
But after that inspection period, after we negotiate repairs or closing costs, we move forward and we start the process with the loan. So at that point, we already got the contract to you, the lender. You've already started getting all the documents you needed. If you don't have them already, you're sending that that contract and that file to processing. At that point forward, it's really on the lender. They order the appraisal, and we're waiting on that. And you're probably asking for explanation letters or similar documents, or for them to get their insurance set up. But really, it's a long waiting period after that point for the buyer until we close.
So it goes back to that question that you and I had, or we spoke about a minute ago, which is the fears of, am I done? Am I good? Can anything happen bad? That conversation, those questions, those concerns, they're real. They're just emotions, but they're real emotions. And this is why I give people my cell phone. If I'm out at dinner and you call me and you're concerned because something doesn't feel right, or you feel scared all of a sudden, call me. I'll answer the phone. Mm-hmm. I don't always carry my laptop with me, but if I do, we can relook at numbers. We can look at what options are, and we can talk about whatever your concerns are. It doesn't need to be on some formal 8 to 5 Monday through Friday schedule like some people. So those are the little things that we can help. They might call you and all of a sudden maybe they drove through that neighborhood at night and they saw some things that they didn't like seeing in the neighborhood. That's where they call you and say, hey, listen, is this normal? Or is this a concern? Or, hey, I don't like this. I need to move out. I can't deal with this crazy neighbor that's playing music at 3 a.m. Maybe they want to opt out for that. Is that something they could do?
After the option period, it's harder to opt out of the contract. There are a couple different options. One of the most common opt-out options in the contract is if the house doesn't appraise. And so in the initial contract, we'll put a contingency that says it has to appraise for the amount we're buying it for. And so if it doesn't, then we can opt out and get our earnest money back. But after the option period, you really got to know and feel safe. And that's when you do your driving. You want to do your driving. You want to talk to the neighbors. You want to ask around your friends or family about that neighborhood. You want to do it during the option period as much as possible, because after that, it makes it a lot harder to get the earnest money back. But there are outs to get the option money back.
Here's a weird question. What if I'm a buyer living in Las Vegas and I want to move to San Antonio? Well, I can't do those things. I can't drive the neighborhood and I can't talk to neighbors. How does working with you help me?
So what I've done with a lot of people that live out of town and don't want to physically come here to look at the houses and tour the houses is I ask them if they have any friends or family that are willing to tour the houses with them or for them, because that's going to give them a lot more insight, a lot more opinions. Maybe they have certain questions that they would like to bounce off those people that are looking for them. And maybe those people know their taste a little bit better than I do. But if they don't have that option, what I can do is I can go tour the house for you, and I'll make like a little tour video, and I'll point out upgrades and maybe defects of the house or my overall opinion of the house, just walking through it. And I've done this for a couple buyers. Most times buyers want to put their eyes on the property themselves. But if I do a good tour, they're fine with, it just depends on the buyer. They're fine typically with moving forward. But somebody should set some eyes on that property.
Yeah, because you and I have worked with, we had that one lady that was in Tokyo that was going to relocate. And then we worked with buyers that were living in another state that, for whatever reason, weren't able to travel down here. So, yeah, I mean, it's anything's doable. We just have to find a way to make it work. And if they have family or friends that work or live here, makes it so much easier for them.
That makes it a whole lot easier, because they're like, if they've never lived here in San Antonio, they're not very familiar with the areas or schools or whatnot, which I can tell them about areas and schools. But it just helps to have somebody here that they know and they fully trust as well. I'm so willing to do the tours and stuff like that for them, but them having someone here, or if they're familiar with San Antonio, helps a lot. So it just depends on their situation.
It's funny that that comes up, because they'll ask me, hey, where are you from? Well, I can say that I've lived in San Antonio the better part of most of my life. I've lived in Houston. I've lived in Dallas. I've lived in different cities, and I can kind of give you an idea of what my experiences were and what I liked and disliked about where I lived, so that people can also, that are coming from out of state. I get this a lot with veterans or service members.
Sure.
They're not familiar with it.
No, and maybe they want to stay close to the base.
Right. Or a medical center or something
Sure.
that is more for their family. And they might ask, well, what if I live in this neighborhood? Well, great neighborhood. You've got access to the freeways, a grocery store across the street. I said, oh, this is a slam dunk. Well, what if I want to live over here? Well, you're going to have some different traffic issues. That whole area is under construction right now.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's something they're not going to know, right?
Right.
So it's all relevant. I'll ask them about where they're planning to work, how far are they willing to commute from work. So depending on the area and whether or not they work around there is big, right? If they have any children that they want to be in a certain school district, they have good, they've heard good things about, or they're looking at the ratings online. So we just have an in-depth conversation for out-of-town buyers. It's definitely a lot different. Like, I'm going to plan to meet with some of your buyers here in the next month or so. They're going to come down here. But in the meantime, I've been sending them properties. They've been communicating with me, sending me properties. And then we'll set up time for their friends and family to come and look at some houses for them. And depending on that feedback and my tours, they'll come down here and we'll line up houses over the weekend and we'll lock something down. So there are situations like that all the time.
Very cool. And then just as a sidebar note, I mean, if that family does find a couple houses that they look at that they like, let me know, because I can put those addresses to the investors up front and kind of nudge that process along internally with them, because then they'll be able to see, based on that loan structure and that property address, what kind of scenario they want to pitch to them.
Yeah, and this is something else I like doing with you too. Before we even lock down that initial contract with that offer, is we can give you the address and you can run all the numbers.
Oh, and give them an exact number.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, so we know what the closing costs look like in that area. We know what the estimated payment looks like in that area, and we can even get an insurance quote up front. The guys at my insurance group are real fast about getting a quote for us, so we can really, really get a really accurate number for them overall. I
got one last question, Ryan. How much should I put down for my down payment?
That's more of a lender question.
Okay.
It all depends, right? Are we doing an FHA loan? Are we doing a VA loan? Are we going conventional? Are we doing a non-QM loan, right? An investor type loan. There's all different types out there.
So there is no magic number.
Depending on what you want to do, I can tell you minimums.
Okay.
For sure. Most of my first-time buyers will buy FHA, 3.5% down. VA buyers, 0 down. That's great. Conventionals as low as 3% down.
Yeah.
If you have higher than a 680 credit score, 700 credit score, you're going to look at that option as well. And there's pros and cons to all loans, right?
So talking with you sounds like I'm going to be educated, so that when I do talk to the lender, I now have a map of a conversation I can have and a gauge of what to expect from that.
Yeah, and last time we talked about USDA loans, which they're probably not used as much right now, but I used to use them all the time. I heard recently they got a little more stricter with their debt-to-income ratios, but
it's a little more of a challenging loan for the lender, and if a lender doesn't know how to do it, it's very easy for a lender to make a mistake.
But it's 0 down.
But it's a home run product for a family.
Very.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we talked about the grant options, right? The grant and bond options. Those are also 0 down. Basically, you're getting a whole bunch of money up front. So to learn how those are structured as well, there's a lot of opportunities for people.
Again, I'm doing an applicant right now that's challenged with savings. She had a family emergency. And she says, well, what can I do? I don't want to have to wait till, end of the summer to start looking for a home. I said, you don't have to. We have FHA products that will do 100% financing. We have investors that will help. So there's a solution for everybody. It may not be perfect for everyone, but it's still an option. And they can have the choice now. And we ended up talking about what that rate scenario would look like, what that payment scenario would look like. And she called me the next day and said, "Oh, wait, don't worry about it. My parents are going to give me a gift." They didn't want her to wait, and they didn't want her to use that option either. So we were able to solve the problem.
A lot of people don't think about the gift, but the gift from a family member,
It helps a lot.
That's awesome.
And if you can, it's worth asking.
Yeah. And you ask all those questions.
We do. Well, Ryan, I mean, today was a very good day. We've been here for about an hour now. I want to say to everybody out there, if you want to buy a home, if you're thinking about buying a home, if you're curious if you can afford a home, call me, call Ryan. We're going to be able to find a way to help you.
Yeah, I would just say don't be fearful about buying a house, because in the long term, it's always going to pay off. So many people that I've worked with in the past, we've had a ton of different conversations, maybe over 6 months, maybe over a year, maybe over 2 years. And eventually when they bought and looking back, they're like, man, I wish I would have done it sooner.
I think we all wish we had done it sooner.
Until,
Thank you.
Until next time, guys, signing off.